I've been listening to the coverage of the latest courtroom crap that they're putting Tamara Lich through in Alberta, and it's just nuts. The government's actions against the truckers convoy organizer Tamara Lich they've morphed into an outright vendetta, and it's repugnant to watch. Crown Prosecutor Moise Karimji sounded obsessive as he demanded Lich be tossed back into jail for the most flimsy of perceived bail violations. So the court exchanges between the prosecutor and Justice Kevin Phillips were fiery to listen to. The judge repeatedly had to admonish the prosecutor, saying he was surprised by this guy's name's something else, by the prosecutor's decorum, and asked him to contemplate that. And the prosecutor was furious, and he asked the justice to recuse himself from the case, stating he was considering a mistrial application due to the judge's comments. This is just a bail hearing, guys. So what high crime did Tamara Lich commit in order to bring about such an effort to revoke her bail? Well, Lich is receiving an award from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. It's called the George Jonas Freedom Award. She didn't demand the award or apply for it. It was granted to her by the JCCF. They give one out to people every year who they felt were worthy of recognition for their efforts to promote freedom. The alleged crime isn't that Lich is receiving the award, but that she dared to respond to the email informing her of it, saying that she'd be honored to accept it. That's it. Nothing more. They're framing that as being apparently promoting the convoy. It's insane, and they want to throw her back in jail. Now, Lich's been free on bail since March 7th. She spent weeks in jail already, way too long, and the Crown fought her release on bail tooth and nail. They wanted her to remain incarcerated for months. Lich has had the ability, has abided diligently by her bail conditions for all of those months. She's not been traveling, she hasn't been talking to any of the press, and she hasn't been doing any social media. It's telling that the worst alleged violation the Crown could find to her bail conditions was an affirmative response to an award she was being offered. Lich didn't commit to traveling to accept the award, by the way, and she wasn't celebrating or posting about it in social media. All she did was accept it and say she was honored in an email. Due to this, the Crown's willing to tie up our court system and wants a harmless woman to languish in jail for an indeterminate period. Bail should only be denied if the person charged with a crime is deemed to be high risk to reoffend or flee. Now, Lich has been out for months. She's clearly not made any efforts to flee the country, and it's unlikely she's going to. She's got family here. She's got children here. She has a spotless criminal record as well. She's been a law-abiding citizen for decades. It's not as if she has a propensity for committing crimes. She isn't a chronic protester or activist. She simply started a fundraiser for a protest and got swept up in what turned out to be one of the biggest public protests in Canadian history. Aside from being involved in a registered federal political party, her record of public actions is actually pretty thin. Not that chronic protesting or activism are crimes anyway. As for reoffending, what could she do? It's not as if hundreds of semi-trucks and thousands of protesters are idling outside of Ottawa ready to seize Parliament Hill and erect bouncy castles again as soon as Lich gives the word. The protests are gone. It's done. There's no sign they're going to be returning anytime soon. If the government did decide to reinstate a bunch of pandemic restrictions, I expect the protests would return, but they would do so with or without Lich. She was really only one person among thousands. The crime Lich committed was to embarrass the government. The state vendetta against her today is based on nothing but spite and vindictiveness. Lich is a symbol of reason and activism that the government loathes. She isn't a crazed, screaming extremist with a criminal history. She's a mother who felt she needed to peacefully stand up against a government overreaching its authority. Her very existence puts lie to the absurd reactions of the government to the convoy protests, and they despise her for that. Lich is innocent until proven guilty, and she should be granted every possible freedom until if and when she is convicted of something. In 2019, it hit the news that 326 people in Toronto alone who had been charged with firearm offenses had been released on bail. In Alberta, I wrote on that just recently. It's a column on the Western Standard that there was 3 young mothers in the last year who have been killed by offenders who have been released despite having violent histories and convictions. Yet here we are spending all of this time and resources trying to lock up Tamara Lich. The motivation for the vendetta against Lich is political. It has nothing to do with public safety or law. In a year of national embarrassments, this is yet another one. The continued harassment of Lich from the Crown prosecutor is inspired, of course, by a petty, small prime minister who wants to quell any consideration of protests against his government in the future. It's exposing the corrupt and broken nature of Canada's politicized justice system. If Lich is locked up again, the time to protest will return, and this time it'll be outside the course houses of Canada. We can't allow this gross persecution to continue or to succeed.